When the maid's son begs the millionaire not to enter the meeting, no one believes him. Until the CEO's chair reveals a secret capable of blowing up not just the building, but an entire network of international espionage. Now, the boy everyone ignored has only minutes to prove the truth, before power itself takes its final breath. Before we continue, subscribe now to our channel to receive everyday powerful stories that touch the heart. Manhattan woke to a glass blue sky as Sentinel Tower rose like a blade, and on the 72nd floor Graham Whitaker paced toward the executive lobby with a schedule that could not bend. He wore resolve the way other men wore cologne, crisp and imprinting, while the logo of Whitaker's Sentinel Systems gleamed from the wall like a medal pinned to the city's chest. Claire Benson matched his stride with a tablet in hand, eyes filtering numbers and faces, calculating the 1,000 quiet ways a day can go right and the single loud way it can go wrong. Behind them, the new North Point protective detail drifted like shadows, polite and precise, their earpieces murmuring a private metronome of control. Graham tasted the thrill of a Pentagon signing and the metallic aftertaste of risk, doing the math that all empires do between fear and fortune. He had slept less than 4 hours and believed that was the toll genius pays when it asks tomorrow to arrive early. The elevator arrived with a sigh that felt like the building's approval, and he stepped out into a lobby washed in white light. Plants stood in architectural silence, and marble reflected their patience. Everything in this altitude was curated to look invulnerable. He told himself the morning had already chosen him, and he only needed to shake its hand at 2:30 p.m. Claire noted the time, 8:12 a.m., and felt the day's spine align, as if destiny had chosen a clean line. A cleaning cart turned a corner with the neat hum of wheels, a mother in a navy polo guiding it with the uncelebrated grace of people who keep palaces from smelling like palaces. Her son walked half a step behind, sneakers too honest for this floor, eyes widened by an America of glass, steel, and possibility. He carried the nervous courage of someone who knows something and has never been allowed to interrupt the rich. Graham reached for the conference badge Claire handed him, feeling its plastic edge and the weight of deals layered inside it like strata. The boy broke into a run, heart drumming, and the lobby's air thinned as if the building had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. "Mr. Whitaker, don't go into the meeting." Noah Martinez's voice cracked just enough to sound like alarm, not theater, and every syllable landed where pride hates to be touched. Rosa Martinez froze a cartwheel with her palm as if it were a small planet she could stop from spinning, shame flaring in her cheeks, and 1,000 apologies racing to be first. Graham's gaze found the boy the way a hawk finds motion, accurate, without tenderness, trained by years of forums where time is money and interruptions are theft. Claire slid half a step forward to buffer the collision of worlds, clipboard angling like a shield that smiled. North Point's nearest guard drifted closer by habit, coiling distance into control, his shoes quiet on marble that preferred its echoes curated. Noah swallowed a rain of doubt and clutched his phone so tightly it became a conviction, breath riding a thin line between panic and duty. He smelled the citrus clean of the lobby and the faint metallic whisper of cables hidden in the walls, the building's private weather. Graham heard the plea and filed it beside meteor strikes and lottery wins. Things possible but irrelevant in calendars that do not make space for miracles. Yet something in the boy's tone nudged a shelf inside him where memories of other warnings slept under dust. Claire clocked the tremor in Noah's hand, the way children tremble when truth outweighs permission. Rosa whispered his name like a stitched prayer, her chest tightening with the ancient fear of doors that close on people like her. The guard's smile didn't travel to his eyes, where still water keeps secrets from the sky. Noah felt heat climb his neck and decided fear was a ladder, not a wall. He lifted the phone like an offering from a smaller country. "Please," he said, voice steadying. "You're not safe at 2:30. Graham considered the hour, the itinerary, the investors arriving with pens loaded like pistons, and the cost curve of indulging a child in an economy of seconds. Claire's eyes flicked to the boy's screen, catching a waveform, a name tag timestamp, the strange geometry of chance carving a corridor through protocol. Rosa tasted copper in her mouth, a body's way of remembering every time the powerful chose not to hear the quiet. Noah's thumb hovered over play, and courage pressed down, releasing a whisper in another alphabet that carried the weight of intent. A voice on the recording spoke about a chair as if furniture could become a trigger, about pressure as if gravity itself could be trained to betray. The word Whitaker crackled inside foreign syllables, unmistakable as one's own name in a crowded station. Claire felt the smallest muscle in her jaw tense, the human meter for when coincidence stops being polite. Graham's certainty shifted a millimeter, a movement so small it could be mistaken for breath, and yet the room felt it. The North Point guard's glance cut sideways, quick as a shutter, then returned to neutral as if neutrality were a disguise. Rosa's fingers dug into the cart handle until plastic protested, a mother anchoring a family against high winds. Noah watched the color change in adult faces, the twilight between dismissal and attention. He thought of how games teach you to listen for patterns in noise, and realized life plays by the same code. Claire lowered her clipboard, which in this altitude looked almost like lowering a drawbridge. Graham exhaled, a calculation unspooling, pride bumping against prudence in a narrow hallway. From the service corridor, a second guard paused, just long enough to hear the word pressure before resuming his smile toward the glass doors. Rosa Martinez began her shift long before the city remembered to stretch, pushing her cart through the silver arteries of Sentinel Tower where silence smelled like disinfectant and ambition. Noah trailed beside her, backpack half-zipped, hair still damp from a hurried shower, eyes bright with the wonder of being allowed inside the world where skyscrapers thought they were gods. She warned him not to touch anything, especially the glass walls that cost more than their apartment. But he was already translating the names on office doors into stories, curious about the humans behind polished logos. Rosa had begged the morning guard to let him stay until school opened. The woman understood. She was a mother too. The tower's lights woke floor by floor, spilling gold onto carpeted corridors, and Noah felt as if he were inside a giant computer booting up. He sat quietly near the service closet, sketching robots in his notebook, pretending not to listen to the orchestra of adult footsteps beyond the wall. But curiosity has thin walls. Through the ventilation shaft came voices that didn't belong to cleaners, flat, rhythmic, carrying the hard consonants of somewhere far colder than Manhattan. The words leapt at him. Chair switch. Payload. 2:30 p.m. Whitaker. His pencil froze mid-stroke, heart stuttering the way servers pause before crash. He recognized fragments of another language, Russian, maybe Ukrainian, the sounds that used to echo in his online matches when teammates whispered strategy. The tone was wrong, low and sure, like people who already knew the ending. Rosa hummed softly nearby, unaware that the air around them had just changed temperature. Noah's stomach tightened with a sense of math he didn't yet know how to solve. If these men were security, why hide their words? He peeked through the cracked door and saw black suits, earpieces glinting, faces too careful to be ordinary. The world suddenly felt thinner, as if truth itself had been stretched across glass. He pressed his ear closer, pulse sinking to every syllable. The shorter man gestured toward a blueprint on a tablet. Even from the corner, Noah caught the shape of a conference table, the red mark of a seat dead center. "Target sits here," one said in English, accent bending consonants into warnings. The other replied in a blur of Slavic murmurs, only one phrase clean enough to cut: "Davolny sensor." Noah replayed the sound in his head, Davolny, pressure, his mind sprinting through half-remembered Duolingo lessons. They spoke of triggers, sequence, timing, words that belonged in games, not offices. He wanted to call for his mother, but something older than his age whispered that silence was safer until he understood what he had heard. He crouched back, knees trembling against tile, the mop bucket's water rippling with his heartbeat. Rosa's radio crackled faintly, a mundane sound that seemed to mock the gravity of his discovery. The men laughed once, too sharply, and walked toward the elevators, voices dissolving into the hum of the building. Noah stayed frozen, a statue of decision, eyes wide at the echo of a name. Whitaker, bouncing like a secret against his ribs. He thought of the tall man from the posters in the lobby, the one shaking hands with presidents. Was he the target? The clock on the wall said 8:47 a.m., and the world's fate had just been handed to a 12-year-old boy with a backpack full of homework. He closed the notebook slowly, as if any sudden movement might change reality. And somewhere between fear and instinct, an idea took shape. He reached into his bag, fingers brushing past pencils, candy wrappers, and the small smartphone his mother insisted he keep for emergencies. This felt like one. He opened the voice recorder, the red circle pulsing on the screen like a heartbeat made visible. The corridor outside was quiet again, but the silence itself seemed charged, waiting to see what he would do. Rosa called his name from down the hall, her tone calm, unknowing, wrapping the word Noah in the safety of routine. He didn't answer. His voice might shatter the fragile line between what he knew and what he could prove. Instead, he stepped toward the corner where the men had stood, the faint smell of cologne and static still lingering. He placed the phone near the vent's narrow opening, pressed record, and whispered the timestamp just as he'd seen detectives do on television. For a moment, guilt fluttered in his chest. Recording strangers was wrong, but something heavier outweighed it. The image of a man unknowingly sitting where danger waited. Noah straightened, listening for footsteps, and felt the building breathe around him, machines in the walls keeping their own secrets. He knew the recording might capture nothing, or everything. Either way, it was proof that he wasn't just a kid seeing ghosts in adult spaces. The red light blinked again, steady and patient, and the boy realized he had just stepped across the invisible line between observer and witness. The day outside glittered like an ordinary Thursday, but in the hollow between two heartbeats, fate had started its countdown. By 9:05, the building had slipped into its rhythm, heels ticking against marble, elevators whispering, coffee machines hissing like polite applause. Noah stood near the executive lobby, the recorded conversation trembling inside his pocket like a living thing. He had rehearsed the words a dozen times on the way up the service elevator, but courage sounds different when spoken aloud to power. Through the glass doors, he saw Graham Whitaker stepping out of the conference suite, voice low, charm calibrated to command both loyalty and fear. Rosa was still on the lower floors, unaware that her son had wandered into the upper atmosphere of money and control. The suits around Graham moved with synchronized efficiency, orbiting him like satellites guarding their planet. Noah inhaled sharply, felt the world tilt on its axis, and stepped forward into their orbit. "Mr. Whitaker, please, don't go to the 2:30 meeting," he said, louder than he meant to, the echo bouncing off glass and steel. The lobby froze. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause in disbelief. Claire Benson blinked, her tablet lowering a fraction, curiosity flickering behind practiced calm. Graham's expression barely shifted, just a faint furrow, the kind powerful men wear when confronted by the unpredictable. "Son, that's quite a statement," he said, tone half amused, half warning. "And a dangerous one if you're joking." Noah shook his head so hard the backpack strap slipped from his shoulder. "It's not a joke. They're planning something under your chair." Claire took a step closer, voice gentle but precise. "Who's they, sweetheart?" The boy's hands trembled as he pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over play, the truth ready to break the air open. The sound that spilled from the speaker was grainy but unmistakable, foreign vowels clashing with clipped English phrases, a tension hidden in syllables. "Davelny sir," one voice said. Then laughter, sharp and humorless. Claire's brow furrowed. Her time with defense contracts had taught her enough Russian to translate one word: pressure. Chair switch, 2:30, followed another voice, and then the crisp, unmistakable Whitaker. The marble beneath them might as well have cracked. Graham looked down at Noah, searching the boy's face for signs of fantasy or manipulation. He saw none, just the trembling focus of a child who had already decided truth was worth punishment. Rose's voice arrived breathless from the corridor. "Noah," but her son didn't flinch. He kept the phone raised like a shield between innocence and disbelief. Claire's eyes darted to the security team. One of the North Point guards exchanged a glance too, controlled to be casual. Graham caught it too, but dismissed it as paranoia. He'd built his fortune on the discipline of ignoring distractions. "You've been watching too many movies," he said finally, his voice lowering to something almost kind. The boy's heart sank, and Rose's arms wrapped around him as though she could erase his words from the air. But the recording still whispered, looping quietly, the foreign voices repeating that name, Whitaker, over and over, like a countdown he could almost hear. Claire hesitated, torn between loyalty to her boss and the instinct that told her danger rarely announces itself twice. "Sir, maybe we should." "No," Graham cut her off, sharp but composed. "We have protocol. Bring in Victor Hale, head of security. Let him verify the boy's claims." He turned back to Noah with a smile designed for investors and frightened staff alike. "We take safety seriously, young man. I promise you that." Noah wanted to believe him, but the guard at the door, one of the men he'd heard earlier, had just entered the lobby, posture too still to be normal. The boy's pulse quickened. He tugged on his mother's sleeve, whispering, "That's one of them." Rosa frowned, misunderstanding the urgency as fear of punishment. "Don't make it worse, Mijo." Claire noticed the same guard's gaze linger on the phone in Noah's hand a moment too long before sliding back to neutrality. The air grew heavy with a tension no one wanted to name. Graham exhaled, the matter already fading into the day's schedule in his mind. "We'll have the chief handle this. Let's not waste time." He gestured toward the glass doors leading to the conference corridor, unaware that the clock had already started ticking toward 2:30. Behind him, Noah's voice cracked one last time, desperate and small. "Please, sir, don't sit in that chair." Graham didn't turn around. "Call security," he told Claire, and the words fell like a gavel that would echo long after 2:30 arrived. Victor Hale arrived with the self-assured quiet of men who never rush because control is their native language. Tall, trim, and pressed into his black suit as though it were part of his skin, he extended a hand to Graham with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning, Mr. Whitaker. Heard we've got a security concern," he said, his tone polished, unbothered, practiced in turning panic into procedure. Claire briefed him quickly, summarizing the child, the recording, the word pressure. The time, 2:30. Victor nodded once, eyes flicking toward Noah with the slow precision of a scanner. The look wasn't curious. It was assessing, predatory beneath its professionalism. He turned back to Graham. "We'll conduct a standard sweep, sir. Routine measure. Probably a misheard conversation from another department." His calmness was textbook, his control absolute. But Noah's stomach dropped. The cadence of Victor's voice, each consonant heavy, deliberate, was identical to the one in the recording. That same tone had said payload in Russian accented English only hours earlier. He felt his pulse pound in his ears, as if his body wanted to shout what his voice couldn't. Rosa, standing beside him, felt his hand tense. "Say thank you to the gentleman and let's go," she whispered in Spanish, her cheeks burning with apology she should know. Noah stayed frozen, eyes locked on Victor Hale, realization burning behind his silence. Graham didn't notice the exchange. He was already scanning the day's agenda on Claire's tablet, seeing risk as merely an item to delegate. Victor produced a small handheld detector from his belt, sleek and corporate, the kind of device that looked reassuring even when it meant nothing. "Let's start with the conference floor," he suggested smoothly, already stepping toward the elevator with one of his men. Claire moved to follow, but Graham gestured for her to stay. "No need. They'll handle it." Noah's lips parted in protest, but Rosa tugged gently on his arm, mistaking terror for defiance. "Enough, Noah. You've done too much already." Her whisper carried exhaustion, the language of workers who knew that truth often costs more than silence. The elevator doors closed behind Victor and his associate, their reflections fracturing across the mirrored surface like ghosts escaping into another dimension. Claire exhaled and rubbed her temples. "Sir, just for safety, maybe we should." "No," Graham interrupted, eyes on his watch. "The investors fly in at noon. If we start treating every rumor as a threat, we'll never get anything done." He smiled, confident again, armor resealed. Noah felt the distance widen, an invisible chasm between those who command and those who warn. The boy wanted to speak, but the weight of adults' disbelief pressed the air from his chest. Victor's voice still echoed in his mind, curling through the words like smoke that never disperses. When the elevator pinged again, Rosa guided him inside, away from marble and glass, away from the faint electric hum of danger that no one else seemed to hear. Somewhere high above, the security sweep had already begun, led by the very man it should have exposed. Back in the janitorial hall, the morning dimmed into the stale smell of cleaning solvents and metal buckets. Rosa crouched to face her son, her tone soft but firm. "You scared everyone, Noah. Mr. Whitaker is an important man. You can't just—" He shook his head, words piling behind his lips. "Mom, that guy, the one with the scanner, he's the same voice. The one from the recording." Her expression flickered, the maternal instinct to comfort battling the fatigue of disbelief. "You must have confused it. There are many accents in this building." Noah wanted to scream. He wanted her to remember every night she told him how dangerous lies could be and how honesty mattered more than fear. But Rosa's gaze held the practical terror of people who couldn't afford to be right. She stood, brushing dust from her uniform, her voice low. "We'll just keep working and stay out of trouble. Let them handle their business." Trouble, Noah thought, was already handling them. When they returned to the upper floor later, the conference layout map still glowed on a digital screen outside the boardroom. He noticed the red highlighted seat labeled G. Whitaker, center chair. The image seared into his memory, a perfect target disguised as authority. And while Rosa turned away to polish the glass door, Noah stared at that chair on the map, realizing that at 2:30, someone wasn't supposed to walk out alive. By 10:20, the tower hummed with confidence, unaware that its heartbeat had already been rewritten. Noah sat on an overturned supply crate, the morning's events replaying like an unfinished riddle. Every adult he'd spoken to had either smiled politely or looked through him as if words from a child evaporated before reaching the air. But numbers didn't lie, and time was a number that refused to wait. He opened his phone, the recording glowing like a secret flame, and set himself a countdown. 4 hours and 10 minutes until the 2:30 meeting. That single fact became his world. He had until then to prove it, or watch something terrible happen. His mother was down 3 floors, cleaning restrooms. No one would notice him gone for a few minutes. He slipped her spare access badge from the side pocket of her cleaning apron, heart pounding at the theft, though he told himself it was only borrowed time. The service corridors of Sentinel Tower were another city entirely, narrow, metal-lined, breathing with the soft mechanical sighs of vents and servers. The deeper he went, the louder the tower's invisible machinery became, like a pulse echoing the urgency inside him. He moved past stacks of janitorial supplies and emergency lighting until he reached the glass door marked AV and Systems Access. Authorized personnel only. The card reader blinked red until Rose's badge kissed it. Then green light spilled like permission he hadn't earned. Inside, the room smelled of cold electronics and ozone. Racks of routers and fiber cables glowed faintly, their lights flickering like constellations of data. Noah whispered to himself, if they hid something, it's gotta talk to something, and began to search for what didn't belong. He followed the path of the cables the way a detective follows motive, slowly, deliberately, eyes open for inconsistencies. Most wires were neatly bundled, labeled in corporate shorthand. But one junction, just above the central hub, looked too new, its insulation unscuffed, its screws untouched by the grime of time. A metal plate bore a recent sticker, MP12. He ran his finger over the code, the initials prickling like recognition. North Point, the name carved through his chest, confirmation wrapped in fear. He crouched closer, tracing the fresh cables that snaked behind the rack toward the wall adjoining conference room A. A faint hum pulsed from inside the conduit, a vibration that didn't match the rhythm of the other systems. He bent down, pressing his ear to the metal, catching a faint oscillation, almost like a heartbeat waiting for a signal. This wasn't sound meant for humans. It was the quiet speech of machines plotting obedience. He snapped 2 quick photos with his phone, hands shaking as the flash briefly illuminated the narrow space. Every instinct screamed to leave, to find Claire or the real security team, but he knew words would fail again without proof. He opened the maintenance panel, the screws stiff, and found a black module nestled between fiber lines, small enough to fit in his palm. Its LED pulsed once, green to red, a wink of acknowledgement. The time on his phone read 10:47. He had evidence, but not yet understanding. As he leaned closer to take another photo, the air changed behind him. The gentle hum of machinery was suddenly joined by something heavier, a scuff of a boot's sole against metal, deliberate and slow. Noah froze, camera half raised, every muscle seizing as his ears sharpened. Through the reflection on the glass door, he caught the distorted silhouette of a man entering the corridor. Tall, dark suit. The outline of an earpiece curved behind his ear like a question mark made of wire. The man's pace was unhurried, the rhythm of someone certain of his right to be there. Noah's mind raced. He had no reason to be in this room, no lie strong enough to survive a professional liar's gaze. He glanced toward the emergency hatch near the cable racks, his only exit, but it was across an open stretch of light. The footsteps grew closer, steady as a clock counting down his courage. He slid the phone into his pocket, fingers brushing against the edge of Rose's badge, praying it would be enough if caught. A voice, the same voice from the recording, drifted in, soft, accented, predatory. "Who's in there?" Noah's breath caught as the shadow darkened the doorway, and for a moment even the machines seemed to hold their noise. Noah's lungs burned with the effort to make silence smaller than sound. He ducked behind a column of stacked supply crates, heart hammering loud enough that he was sure it betrayed him. Through the thin crack between two boxes, he saw polished shoes enter the AV room, slow and searching. The man scanned the space like someone expecting a ghost, hand brushing along cables with a familiarity too intimate for maintenance. Noah pressed himself deeper into the shadows, the scent of dust and cardboard thick against his face. The man's radio crackled faintly. Then came another voice from the hallway, low and sharp. "Status?" Victor Hale stepped into view. Even in half-light, his expression carried the cool detachment of a man who could command violence as easily as a meeting. He spoke into his earpiece, switching between English and something harder, rougher, Ukrainian or Russian. Noah couldn't tell which. Then words came clear. "Weight sensor under the head chair. When he sits, we push the payload." The phrase hit Noah like an electric shock. Weight sensor, head chair. Every clue aligned into one unmistakable picture. They weren't just planning sabotage, they were planning murder. The men leaned over the hub, checking signals, unaware that a boy no taller than their ambition was recording every syllable that might destroy them. He tapped the red circle on his phone, and the screen came alive again, the digital heartbeat of truth returning. The air was heavy with the soft electronic hum of systems waiting for command. One of the men spoke in Ukrainian, his tone brisk. "Zapasny kanal is ready." Noah remembered the meaning from an old game translation he'd once seen. Backup channel. They had a secondary trigger. He gripped his phone tighter, keeping the mic aimed through the crack. Victor gave a short nod. "Good. No mistakes." At 2:30, Whitaker sits, and the world moves on. The other man chuckled, the sound short and cruel. "And we disappear before the dust does." Noah felt sweat crawl down his back, the realization heavier than fear. He wasn't just eavesdropping anymore. He was the only person alive who knew how to stop them. The men gathered papers and moved closer to the rack he had examined minutes before. If they turned even slightly, they'd see him crouched between boxes and shadows, trembling like a fault line under pressure. One of them wiped his palm along the equipment and said, "NP 12 connected. Signal stable." Noah's phone screen dimmed automatically, but even that faint glow felt like fire in the dark. He covered it with his hand, the heat of the device pulsing against his skin. The room smelled of ozone and risk. He tried not to breathe, not to think, only to survive the seconds stretching longer than minutes. Then betrayal came not from men, but from machines. A faint vibration shook in his pocket, the phone trembling like a pulse waking from sleep. Noah's stomach dropped before his brain understood. The school. He had forgotten to silence notifications. A cheerful chime pierced the silence. Reminder, math quiz today. Every head in the room snapped toward the crates. Victor's eyes narrowed. He lifted his flashlight and stepped forward. Noah's mind screamed for movement, but his body stayed frozen between options, panic clawing at his ribs. The beam of light slid across the floor, closer, finding the edge of the box where his shoe pressed too close to the open light. He clenched his teeth, trying to hold the sound of his breath inside. The flashlight stopped, then retreated slightly as one of the other men spoke. "Probably the HVAC motor. These ducts are old." Victor hesitated, the predator's instinct arguing with logic, then exhaled sharply. "Fine. Let's move." We've got systems to test upstairs." Boots shuffled away. The door hissed shut. Noah stayed still long after they'd gone, counting heartbeats until he could trust his muscles again. When he finally looked at his phone, the red light still blinked, recording, alive, victorious. He exhaled a sound that was half laugh, half sob. For now, the tower still stood, and he had proof that evil spoke in perfect English. By 11:15, sunlight cut sharp angles across Sentinel Tower, pouring through its mirrored skin like liquid glass. Noah's hands trembled as he rode the service elevator up toward the executive level, every floor passing like a heartbeat closer to the truth. The recording on his phone now stretched almost 5 minutes, proof of something monstrous breathing beneath the polish of corporate order. He rehearsed what to say, how to compress horror into a language adults would take seriously. When the elevator doors opened, Claire Benson was at the reception desk, voice crisp as she directed a call, her tone balanced between authority and calm efficiency. She barely noticed the boy until he blurted, "Please, you have to listen to this. It's real." Her eyes softened when she recognized him. "Noah, you're not supposed to be here." But something in his expression, a raw mix of terror and conviction, made her pause. He held up his phone like it was an oxygen tank for the truth. "They're going to hurt Mr. Whitaker." They said 2:30. They said his chair. She hesitated, torn between disbelief and the flicker of instinct that tells seasoned assistants when something doesn't fit. "Show me," she said finally. Noah pressed play, the familiar voices spilling into the sterile air of privilege. The words "payload" and "Whitaker" broke her professional mask. Her fingers tightened around the phone as if holding back an invisible explosion. When the recording ended, silence filled the room like smoke after a fire alarm that hadn't sounded yet. Claire exhaled slowly. "Come with me," she said, voice lower now. "If this is real, there'll be proof in the feeds." The security control room was a maze of monitors, each wall a glowing mosaic of glass and data. Claire scanned through the archive system, her ID card granting partial access, the screens flickering between offices, elevators, and conference corridors. Noah hovered beside her, barely breathing, eyes darting across the silent footage. "There," she said suddenly, zooming into the morning's timestamp. 3 men in North Point uniforms entered through the service dock at 7:42 a.m., carrying a long, black case. The manifest on her tablet showed no record of new equipment deliveries. "Why wasn't this logged?" she muttered, frustration lacing the edges of her composure. She clicked through the angles, watching them unload the case and disappear toward the upper floors, toward conference room A. Noah recognized the gait, the build, the same stillness that predators were before a strike. "That's them," he whispered. The same voices. Claire swallowed hard, the first pulse of real fear curling in her stomach. She reached for the intercom to alert maintenance, but her hand stopped halfway. She knew this was no janitorial problem. This was something designed to hide behind procedure. Her instincts screamed to call Graham directly, yet protocol held her still. "Okay," she said finally, more to herself than to Noah. "Let's verify the feed's integrity first. If it's been tampered with." The door behind them clicked open, cutting her sentence in half like a blade through paper. Victor Hale stepped inside. His presence filled the room before his voice did, calm and heavy, like gravity walking upright. "Ms. Benson," he greeted, eyes sweeping across the glowing monitors. "You don't usually handle system reviews personally." Claire's fingers froze above the keyboard, her expression folding back into professional neutrality. "Just checking a delivery discrepancy." Victor smiled, a precise arrangement of civility that made Noah's pulse spike. "Appreciate the initiative," he said softly. "But these feeds contain sensitive data. I'll take it from here." He moved closer, posture unthreatening but deliberate, his badge flashing the North Point insignia that now felt like a signature of deceit. "I'll need your access credentials," he added, holding out his hand. Claire hesitated, a second too long for comfort. Noah took an involuntary step backward, the phone in his pocket still recording by reflex. Victor's gaze flicked toward the boy and back, like a man cataloging witnesses he might someday erase. "Company policy, Ms. Benson," he said with a voice that pretended to be patient. Claire's throat tightened. She understood the trap. Refuse, and she'd raise suspicion. Comply, and she'd lose control. Noah's heart hammered as Victor leaned over the console, his shadow swallowing the light from the screens. He smiled again, quieter this time. "Let's make sure everyone's safe for the big meeting." The hum of the monitors seemed to grow louder, almost masking the quiet dread in the room. Noah's eyes darted toward the exit, just as Victor's hand reached for the keyboard. By noon, the tower's corridors pulsed with the noise of ordinary work, oblivious to the quiet war waged between trust and suspicion. Victor Hale had left the monitoring room 20 minutes earlier, his composure intact, but his exit had left behind a scent of unease, the kind that lingers after a storm passes without raining. Claire waited 5 full minutes before exhaling the breath she'd been holding, her fingers trembling as she closed out the feed log. "We can't stay here," she whispered. "He's watching these terminals." Noah nodded, gripping his phone like a lifeline. "There's a service entrance behind the conference hallway," he said, remembering the path he'd taken through the ducts. "We can see where they brought that case." Claire hesitated only a heartbeat before following. The hallways seemed brighter now, the air colder. Even the sound of their footsteps felt like it was being recorded. Through a narrow maintenance door, they slipped into the corridor behind Conference Room A, where storage crates and supply boxes formed a forgotten city of shadows. There it was, the black case, sitting half-hidden behind a janitor's bin, its label peeling slightly. Noah crouched beside it, brushing dust from the tag. North Point Logistics, NP 12A. Claire took out her phone and snapped 2 quick photos, the shutter sound barely audible. "Doesn't match any serial in the delivery list," she murmured, scrolling through her corporate database. Noah leaned closer, fingers tracing the fine seams of the case. "Chair switch, payload, pressure," he whispered, the words from the recording fitting together like gears locking into place. He looked up at her. "It's under his seat. The chair triggers it when he sits." Claire's pulse quickened, a cold line of realization running through her chest. She glanced through the narrow viewing slit in the wall panel. The boardroom was already being prepped, assistants setting up laptops, catering trays glinting in the artificial light. At the head of the table sat Graham Whitaker's chair, black leather, centered like a throne in a kingdom of glass. Noah followed her gaze and swallowed hard. "That's the one." Claire forced her mind to steady. "We need confirmation before we go to him. If I walk in with this story and it's wrong, I'm done here." She scrolled through her contacts and found the number she hadn't used in months. Marcus Reed, the company's real head of security. The line crackled. Ocean wind and gulls bled faintly through the speaker. "Claire? It's been a while. What's going on?" She kept her voice low. "Marcus, I need you to tell me who authorized the North Point team working here." "North Point." He paused, confusion replacing warmth. "We don't use North Point. Our security contract is internal." "Who's on site?" Claire's throat tightened. "Victor Hale." Silence on the other end stretched thin. "That's impossible. We've never employed anyone by that name." She closed her eyes, letting the weight of that confirmation sink in. "Then we have a problem, Marcus. A problem that, in less than 2.5 hours, might detonate under her employer's chair. Noah's mind raced ahead, building invisible diagrams of what the payload could mean. If the device was triggered by pressure, it had to be wired through the building's network. Maybe even that hub he'd seen earlier marked MP-12. "Can you reach the Real security feed?" he asked, adrenaline making his words sharper than his age. Claire nodded, fingers flying across her phone as she rerouted access through Marcus's admin credentials. A stream of hidden data flashed across the screen: codes, camera feeds, and login timestamps. "Look at this," she said, showing him the log. They installed new nodes at 8:01 a.m. Same tag, MP-12. "They're inside the system," Noah said quietly. "If we shut down the network, they'll know. We need to stay invisible." Claire exhaled slowly, thinking of Graham's confidence, his refusal to take warnings from anyone without a title. Her stomach churned with frustration. Every minute of disbelief was another wire tightened under that chair. She typed a message to Graham's private number: "Urgent, security threat, delay meeting." But the reply came almost instantly: "Appreciate concern. Meeting proceeds. We'll handle it." Noah read the message over her shoulder, his face paling. "He's not stopping," the boy whispered. "He's still going to sit in that chair." Outside the room, the clock struck 12:15, each chime folding into the quiet rhythm of inevitability, counting down toward 2:30. By 12:40, the day outside Sentinel Tower looked like perfection: sunlight, windless sky, the illusion that the world still obeyed its routines. Inside, Claire Benson's pulse contradicted that calm. Her screen showed Marcus Reed's encrypted message confirming what she already knew. North Point was a ghost company. The tower had been breached by professionals. She stared at the glowing numbers of the clock on her monitor. 1:50 left until the meeting that could become a crime scene. Her hand trembled as she tapped her emergency contacts and scrolled to a name buried in an old briefing folder: Dana Klein, FBI/Joint Terrorism Task Force Liaison. It had been years since they'd spoken, back when Claire handled federal compliance for the company's defense clients. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Dana, this is Claire Benson at Whitaker Sentinel Systems. I've got a suspected infiltration, armed and internal, possibly linked to espionage or worse." The agent's tone shifted instantly, from casual to clipped. How credible? Claire's gaze moved to Noah, who sat across from her in the narrow break room, clutching his phone like a holy relic. "Very," she said. "We have audio of 2 men planning an attack. There's a physical device likely under the CEO's chair." "Understood," Dana said. "I'll handle it discreetly. Don't alarm your principal. Keep the floor operating normally. We'll insert undercover." Claire felt the words settle like ice on her tongue. Normal meant pretending ignorance while danger waited 5 floors above. She ended the call and rubbed her temples. "They're coming," she told Noah. "But we can't let anyone panic. If they sense we know, they'll accelerate." Noah frowned, his young face drawn tight. "Then we need to move faster than them." 15 minutes later, Graham Whitaker stood before his panoramic office windows, admiring the view as if confidence could protect him. He had heard Claire's earlier message, but treated it as overreaction, one of the countless small fires executives extinguished daily with dismissal. The Pentagon contract he was set to finalize that afternoon represented years of work and billions in defense tech revenue. No minor disruption, especially from a frightened assistant and a janitor's son, would derail that. Claire entered quietly, forcing her tone to sound procedural. "Sir, federal compliance requested a random systems audit. They may send someone before your meeting." Graham nodded without looking up. "Fine, as long as they don't interrupt the signing." Noah stepped from behind her, unable to restrain himself. "Mr. Whitaker, You can't have that meeting. They're going to trigger it when you sit down. Graham turned, eyes narrowing. Trigger what exactly? The payload, Noah said, his voice trembling. It's wired under your chair. We have proof. Graham exhaled sharply, patience thinning. Son, enough. I appreciate your concern, but I can't cancel a federal contract because of playground rumors. Claire tried again, softer now. Sir, please. Just move the meeting to another room. We can do it quietly, without alerting anyone. No, he said firmly. We close this deal today. Our Pentagon partners are already in the air. No chaos, no delays. He adjusted his cufflinks as if that settled the matter. Noah looked at Claire helplessly, his voice breaking. He's going to die if he sits there. Graham ignored him, turning back to the skyline that reflected his own conviction, unshakable and tragically sure. The elevator chimed at the far end of the hall. Claire's stomach tightened. She'd been told the agent would arrive quietly, but every sound now felt amplified, suspicious. A tall woman in a navy blazer stepped out, her hair tied in a loose knot. Her ID lanyard marked Whitaker Systems Compliance Division. Good afternoon, she said smoothly, shaking hands with the receptionist. I'm Dana Klein, External Compliance Consultant, here for the pre-defense audit. The voice was even, practiced, federal calm disguised as corporate routine. She moved through the lobby with measured purpose, her gaze cataloging everything. Exits, security cameras, unfamiliar faces. Claire met her halfway, their handshake lingering a second too long. Dana's grip was steady, her whisper discreet. We're in. Keep your CEO occupied. My team is staging on standby. Claire nodded, adrenaline threading through her composure. From across the corridor, Victor Hale watched the exchange, expression unreadable, his reflection warped in the glass like a shadow deciding when to move. Dana's calm smile didn't falter as she passed him, but her hand brushed the concealed comms mic under her sleeve. Target floor secured, she murmured under her breath. Noah's chest tightened. For the first time, the boy realized the fight was no longer just his. Help had arrived, but so had the clock. The digital display outside the conference room glowed, 1:50 p.m. 90 minutes left until sitting down became an act of suicide. By 1:15, tension had woven itself into the architecture of Sentinel Tower. The gleaming corridors, once symbols of triumph, now felt like the polished ribs of a sleeping beast no one dared wake. Dana Klein moved through them with the calculated calm of someone who had learned that panic only alerts predators. Her compliance consultant badge hung loosely from her blazer, but the handheld detector in her bag betrayed her real mission. Claire followed half a step behind, guiding her toward conference room A with polite small talk loud enough to disguise the silence of purpose. Inside the boardroom, the table gleamed like an altar, polished oak, 20 seats arranged in perfect symmetry, the centerpiece of corporate ritual. At the head sat Graham Whitaker's leather chair, positioned precisely where the floor vent met the wiring conduit. Dana's trained eyes noted the details. Screws too new, faint adhesive marks beneath the base, the subtle irregularity of replacement. Just routine safety verification before the government briefing, she explained, forcing a professional smile. Graham looked up from his notes, impatient but composed. Make it quick. My guest will arrive shortly. Claire stood near the door, heart racing, while Noah lingered in the hallway beyond, unable to breathe until this was over. Dana knelt beside the chair, switched on her detector, and swept the device in slow arcs beneath the seat. The screen flickered green, then orange. A low tone pulsed, sharp enough to slice through pretense. Claire's throat went dry. Dana glanced at the display again, energy emission inconsistent with ordinary electronics. Her jaw tightened. Something unnatural lived inside the wood and steel of that chair. Graham's brow furrowed. "What's that sound?" Dana straightened, adjusting the device as if reading static. "Could be interference from the wireless conference system, sir. I'd like to run one deeper scan." He leaned back slightly, irritation rising. "Is that really necessary? We pass every inspection the Pentagon throws at us." She measured her words carefully. "It's best to be thorough, especially before signing defense contracts. One wrong signal can compromise your network." The CEO sighed, torn between pride and the faint tremor of unease creeping up his spine. He gestured toward the room's control panel. "Fine. Do what you need to." Dana swept the base again, this time slower, closer to the bolts anchoring the chair's pedestal. The detector's tone climbed to a steady, ominous whine. Her gaze met Claire's, both understanding the reading without words. Something was broadcasting under there, something that shouldn't. But training and bureaucracy were old enemies of instinct. Protocol required cause probable to dismantle private property, even in a federal intervention. Without explicit authorization from the CEO, she couldn't take action. She straightened, voice calm but urgent. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm detecting an anomaly under this seat. I recommend postponing your meeting until we verify it's harmless." Graham frowned, glancing at the clock. 1:27 p.m. "You're asking me to cancel a $50 million contract over a noise." Dana met his gaze steadily. "I'm asking you to stay alive." Silence filled the boardroom, heavy and unspoken. Then a knock at the door broke it apart. Victor Hale stepped inside with his usual effortless composure, a clipboard in hand and an almost friendly expression. "Everything all right here?" he asked, eyes flicking toward the detector. Dana smiled thinly. "Just a minor calibration check. Standard protocol before a classified meeting." Victor chuckled softly, feigning relief. "Good to hear. Wouldn't want the suits upstairs thinking we can't manage our own furniture." He moved closer, studying the chair like a craftsman admiring his work. "If it helps," he offered, toned silk over steel. "We can swap the seat before the meeting. Just a quick replacement, fresh cushion, same model. Courtesy of North Point." Claire felt her stomach twist. The offer was too convenient, too immediate. Dana read it instantly for what it was: containment, not assistance. Victor's smile never faltered. "We keep spares downstairs. I can have one up in 10 minutes. Graham, still skeptical of the entire ordeal, seemed almost relieved at the suggestion. "Fine. If that speeds things up, do it." Dana opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. Victor was watching her with quiet calculation, his hand resting casually near his radio. He tilted his head slightly, voice soft. "We all want to keep things safe, don't we, Agent?" The word wasn't spoken loud enough for anyone but her to hear. Her blood ran cold. He knew. Across the glass wall, Noah watched the exchange, catching only the rhythm, not the words, but he saw the danger bloom in Dana's eyes. The clock read 1:30 p.m., and the trap was tightening with polite smiles. By 1:35, tension had sharpened into strategy. Dana Klein stood by the boardroom table, her mind spinning through contingency protocols, while Graham debated logistics with Victor Hale as though nothing more serious than catering was at stake. Noah, pressed against the glass wall in the corridor, could see every movement inside. The way Dana's posture had stiffened, the way Victor's eyes tracked her like a chess player anticipating the next piece. He could feel time compressing, the invisible countdown ticking through his veins. Then, like static cracking through fear, an idea sparked. He pushed open the door, startling everyone. "Wait, what if you test it without touching it?" he said, his voice echoing through the sterile air. Claire turned, half ready to scold, half ready to listen. Noah continued, urgency stripping his words of hesitation. Move the chairs. Don't tell them. Just swap their places and scan again. If it's really the chair, the signal moves with it. If not, it's the floor. Dana blinked, surprised by the precision of the thought, the kind that cuts through noise. Victor's gaze hardened, just slightly, but his smile stayed in place. Clever kid, but unnecessary. My men can handle the replacement. No, Dana said quickly, her tone calm but final. We'll handle it. Internal procedure. Graham crossed his arms, torn between irritation and the subtle gravity of her composure. Fine, do your test, but make it quick. I have no intention of rescheduling this meeting. Victor gave a slow nod, the kind that meant compliance on the surface and calculation beneath. As he left the room to fetch a spare, Dana mouthed to Claire. Now, they had less than 10 minutes before the trap reset itself. The boardroom emptied under the pretense of a ventilation check, leaving only Dana, Claire, Noah, and a single technician, Eli Torres, one of the oldest employees in building maintenance, trusted and unshakable. Dana handed him the handheld detector. Follow my lead exactly, she said. Eli crouched beside the CEO's chair while Claire watched the corridor, ensuring Victor stayed out of sight. The room's stillness made every sound significant. The low hum of the air vents, the faint whir of the city below. Switch positions 4 and 1, Dana ordered softly. Eli and Claire lifted the leather chairs with careful precision, swapping them across the table's length. Noah held his breath as the metal legs touched the carpet again, the symmetry of the room restored but the trap undone. Dana nodded once. Now scan under the new position. Eli passed the detector along the floor beneath where Graham's seat had originally been. Nothing but a clean green signal. Then he moved the device to the new location of the chair, the one now occupying the far end of the table. The screen flashed yellow, then red, and the tone rose in an eerie mechanical crescendo. The anomaly hadn't moved with the chair. It stayed fixed to the same spot on the floor. Claire's heart dropped. It's not the chair, she whispered. It's under the flooring. Noah swallowed hard, feeling the air thin as if the room itself understood the meaning of that. The replacement Victor had offered wasn't a repair, it was a reset. They hadn't built a trap inside furniture. They'd built it into the room itself. Dana's jaw tightened as the reality clicked into place. This entire setup was bait, she muttered. And just as the last word left her mouth, footsteps approached down the hall. The slow, certain rhythm of someone who already knew what they'd find. The door handle turned, smooth and confident. Victor Hale stepped back inside, carrying a twin of Graham's chair as if irony had a physical form. Replacement delivered, he announced, setting it gently by the wall. Everything all right here? Dana's face was neutral, but her fingers twitched toward the inside of her blazer where her ID badge hid the comms mic. Perfectly fine, she said, voice even. Just confirming data consistency. Victor's eyes flicked to the detector in Eli's hand, then to the swapped chairs. Testing new positions? He asked casually. Claire forced a smile. Just making sure every seat's comfortable. He gave a soft laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Comfort's important, especially when the stakes are so high. He turned toward the door, pausing only long enough to glance at his watch. 1 hour until the big moment. As the door closed behind him, Dana exhaled slowly. It's the room, she whispered. They rigged the pressure plate beneath the head position. Claire pressed a hand to her forehead, the edges of panic pressing in. Noah looked at the clock, 1:45 p.m., and felt the weight of the moment like gravity itself. Every floor of that tower hummed with business as usual, but in this one room, time was running out, and the floor beneath their feet had just confessed its secret. By 1:55, formality had been stripped away, leaving only purpose. Dana Klein had the confirmation she needed. Cause probable, the phrase that turned hesitation into authority. She slipped on latex gloves from her blazer pocket, the faint snap of rubber slicing through the tension. Claire locked the door and dimmed the lights, transforming the boardroom into a war room disguised as an office. Eli Torres knelt by the carpet, toolkit in hand, his fingers steady despite the tremor in the air. Noah crouched beside him, wide-eyed but resolute, holding the flashlight as if it were a torch against the dark. Dana crouched near the head of the table, marking the coordinates from the scanner with surgical precision. The floor looked flawless, smooth gray composite, no seams visible. But perfection was the oldest camouflage of all. Eli pried at the panel's edge with a flat tool, and a thin hiss escaped as it lifted, the faint scent of heated circuits wafting upward. Beneath, a cluster of wires glimmered like veins beneath skin, new, clean, alien. Dana bent closer, her voice low. "Stop there. Document everything." Claire began snapping photos, her hands trembling despite her control. The hidden device came into view, a rectangular metal capsule bolted beneath the subfloor, its surface engraved with a faint code, INPI 12A/PS. Inside the transparent casing pulsed a sensor node, connected to a pressure pad beneath the carpet, and beside it, a miniature RF module, its LED flickering in heartbeat rhythm. The realization hit them all at once. It wasn't just a bomb, it was communication. Something elsewhere in the building was waiting for this signal to act. Dana steadied her breathing, the practiced calm of someone balancing on a knife's edge. She leaned over the transmitter, scanning it again. The frequency wasn't random. It pulsed on a narrow band often used by encrypted remote systems, military-grade or stolen from them. "Pressure sensor here," she said, voice clipped. "It activates the RF link when a specific weight threshold is reached, likely the target's." Claire's mouth went dry. "So the chair isn't the trigger. He is." Noah felt the words settle like a chill in his bones. "When he sits down, the circuit closes," Dana finished. "And whatever's waiting on the other end receives its green light." Eli reached for the screwdriver again. "We can disconnect it." "No," Dana snapped softly. "Not yet. If they're monitoring, they'll know the moment the signal drops. We need to trace it first." She followed the wire conduits with her eyes, up the wall, behind the molding, toward the ceiling. The sprinkler above the table caught her attention. One nozzle's alignment was subtly off. She climbed onto a chair and unscrewed the metal cover, revealing not plumbing, but a transmitter disguised within, its antenna coiled around the water line. "Secondary relay," she muttered. "They've built a loop network. Even if we block the floor unit, this one sends confirmation." Claire stared upward, heart pounding. They planned redundancy. Military precision. Dana exhaled sharply. "No mistakes," she said, echoing the line from the recording. The room fell silent. The only sound the mechanical whir of the building's air vents and their own shallow breaths. And then, faint but unmistakable, the handheld radio on Dana's belt crackled to life. A male voice bled through static, low, deliberate, confident. "Status check," the voice said, thick with accent. Another answered, faintly distant, "System armed. Signal clean. Green light at 2:30. Dana froze, eyes locking with Claire's. The timestamp on her watch read 1:56 p.m. She reached for her earpiece, whispering to her hidden team. "Confirmed activation schedule. Possible detonation or data breach at 14:30. We're in the same room as the primary trigger." Claire backed away instinctively, pressing her hand against the wall to steady herself. Noah's grip tightened on the flashlight, the beam trembling across the open floor cavity like a heartbeat under interrogation. Eli carefully lowered the panel back into place, covering the exposed wires without sealing them. Every movement felt too loud, too heavy. Dana turned off her radio and looked toward the window, where the city stretched endlessly beneath them, oblivious. She whispered to herself more than anyone else, "They think the system's still hidden. Good. That's how we'll catch them." Outside, the distant reflection of clouds glided across the glass facade, serene and indifferent to the war building inside. And as the red light on the floor unit blinked twice, pausing as if to breathe, the clock on the wall ticked over to 1:57 p.m., 93 minutes until someone sat down and gave death permission to begin. By 2:10, Sentinel Tower had transformed from a fortress of business into a stage set for deception. The FBI's quiet operation spread like ink through the walls. Unseen, efficient, deliberate. Dana's voice moved through the comms channel with surgical calm, her words cutting the chaos into order. No alarms. We keep the theater. Everyone plays their part. Claire and Noah watched from the control room adjoining the boardroom, their reflections ghosted over a wall of live surveillance feeds. Below the sleek conference table, the pressure sensor still slept, its signal rerouted through a decoy loop that would send back a harmless success when triggered. The explosive module had been neutralized by a microjammer slipped into place minutes earlier. Now all that remained was to let the predators reveal themselves. In the main corridor, Graham Whitaker adjusted his tie, unaware of the choreography unfolding around him. His confidence had returned after Dana's reassurances. False calm was easier to sell than truth. To him, the meeting was still real, his legacy about to be sealed in contracts worth more than nations. Behind him, Victor Hale shadowed the procession, a calm shepherd guiding lambs to their seats. Inside the boardroom, the head chair waited, now occupied not by danger's intended target, but by an unmarked dummy, lifelike, suited, and weighted to 90 kilograms, exactly Graham's mass. Dana had insisted on authenticity. Deception, to work, must be perfect. Showtime, she murmured into her mic, the phrase a trigger of its own. The room filled gradually with actors who didn't know they were actors, assistants, 2 FBI techs disguised as analysts, and a handful of federal liaisons playing investors. Dana entered last, clipboard in hand, her expression neutral, almost bored. Victor hovered near the back, pretending to check his watch, the mask of professionalism clinging tightly to his face. Through a hidden channel, an agent stationed in the AV hub whispered, "Signal integrity confirmed. RF loop transmitting." The pressure sensor clicked faintly, soft, harmless, obedient to its new master circuit. Somewhere below them, in the service corridor, a radio flared to life. Target seated. Proceed. Victor's head tilted, a predator scenting blood. He lifted his wrist discreetly, pressing the side button on his smartwatch. One silent command that should have triggered catastrophe. Nothing happened. No flash, no tremor, no smoke. Just the steady hum of air conditioning and the faint shuffle of papers. A flicker of confusion crossed his face, quickly buried beneath practiced calm. He tried again, this time opening a small app masked as a security interface. Again, nothing. Dana's mic hissed quietly in her ear, confirmed attempt. Recording live feed. Claire's hands trembled in the control room as she whispered, "He's trying again. He doesn't know it's dead." Noah watched, eyes wide, as Victor's mask finally began to crack, small fractures of panic beneath layers of arrogance. The predator was beginning to sense the trap. Victor moved toward the door, gesturing to his men in the hallway. "We'll continue setup downstairs," he said smoothly. Technical recalibration, but his voice betrayed a shade too much urgency. Dana straightened. "Mr. Hale," she said evenly, "why don't you stay? Mr. Whitaker might need your expertise during the demonstration." His eyes flicked to hers. Predator meeting predator. "I'm needed elsewhere," he said quietly, reaching for the handle. The lock didn't move. Outside, the magnetic doors clamped shut with an audible click. Every corridor camera turned red in recording mode. Victor's expression froze, realization dawning like a storm across his face. Dana's badge flipped open, her voice cutting through the room with lethal calm. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Step away from the door." In an instant, chaos replaced pretense. One of the imposter guards reached for his holster, but two undercover agents were faster, slamming him to the floor before his weapon cleared the belt. Victor bolted toward the emergency exit leading to the service corridor, shoulder slamming against the frame until the door burst open. Dana shouted, "He's heading east stairwell," and the room erupted in movement. Agents flooding from side halls like veins carrying adrenaline. Through the glass wall, Noah saw Victor's silhouette vanish into the metal maze of maintenance tunnels. The trap had worked, but as the radio crackled in Dana's ear with a chase order, she felt the chill truth settle over her. Cornered predators don't run, they prepare to fight. By 2:32, the illusion shattered into clarity. The pursuit ended 2 floors below in the maintenance wing, where fluorescent lights flickered over concrete and steel. Victor Hale hit the ground beneath a swarm of federal agents, the weight of authority replacing the arrogance that had driven him for weeks. His wrists were cuffed before he could utter another command. The small transmitter on his smartwatch blinked uselessly in protest, its signal intercepted and jammed mid-transmission. Dana arrived seconds later, breathing hard but composed, watching as technicians sealed the evidence container. The device recovered from Victor's pocket, a secondary relay, was an exact match to the RF module beneath the boardroom floor. They hadn't just planned to detonate, they'd planned to steal. Hidden within the circuitry was a dual payload. One to trigger the explosive charge embedded in the chair's pedestal, another to siphon classified data from Whitaker Systems' defense servers the instant chaos erupted. It was elegant in its cruelty, distraction and theft, blood and profit intertwined. Dana stared at Victor as agents pulled him to his feet. "Who are you working for?" she asked. He smirked faintly, the kind of smile that belonged to men who'd never expect to lose. "You'll find out," he said softly. "But not for me." His voice faded beneath the echo of his own footsteps as he was dragged away, swallowed by the tower's endless hallways. Above, the boardroom remained intact. No blast, no data breach, no casualty, only the trembling aftershock of what could have been. And in that quiet, Graham Whitaker finally understood how close he had come to never leaving that chair alive. The meeting that never happened turned into a press conference that no one planned. Security teams filled the floor. Federal agents sealed the scene with yellow tape, while technicians dismantled the deadly architecture hiding beneath the luxury. Graham stood in the center of it all, disheveled and pale, his confidence stripped bare. He looked toward the small cluster of faces near the entrance. Rosa, her uniform stained with dust, Claire, holding back tears, and Noah, still clutching his phone as if the world depended on it. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Graham crossed the room, the sea of agents parting quietly for him. He stopped before the boy who had tried, again and again, to be believed. His voice was low but certain. "You saved my life." Noah blinked, unsure how to answer. "I just didn't want you to die, sir." Graham nodded slowly, the weight of humility settling into his words. "You saw what I couldn't see, and you made me listen." He turned toward Rosa, who stood frozen in disbelief, tears welling behind her lashes. You raised a brave son, Mrs. Alvarez. The kind this world needs more of." Rosa pressed a hand to her mouth, her breath catching between pride and relief. "I just taught him to tell the truth," she whispered. "He did the rest." The moment carried a silence that felt almost sacred, proof that courage didn't always wear suits or badges. Sometimes it wore sneakers and a backpack filled with crayons and impossible ideas. Outside, cameras had begun to gather. Whispers of corporate sabotage, bomb threat, and espionage rippled through the building like wildfire. Dana tried to maintain order, issuing statements to keep panic at bay, but the truth had already found its wings. Graham placed a steady hand on Noah's shoulder as reporters shouted from the corridor. "This young man prevented a tragedy today," he said clearly, his voice carrying beyond the walls. "Because he paid attention when the rest of us were too busy to notice." Flashbulbs exploded like lightning, immortalizing the unlikely heroes standing amid the ruins of greed and secrecy. For Rosa, it was almost too much. The applause, the relief, the realization that her son's curiosity had saved not just a life, but perhaps a company, maybe even a nation's secret. She pulled Noah into her arms, whispering, "Nunca mais divide do que você ouve, meu filho. O mundo precisa de gente que escuta." Noah smiled faintly, exhausted but radiant, glancing toward Dana, who offered a subtle nod of acknowledgement, the rare kind professionals reserve for equals. In that shared silence, gratitude replaced fear, and justice replaced danger. Yet as the crowd pressed closer, microphones rising like spears of curiosity, Dana's earpiece buzzed softly with a new transmission. A low voice, urgent and metallic, said only 5 words that froze her blood cold. "Unit 2 reporting, secondary signal detected." She turned toward the elevator, her expression darkening. The story wasn't over. Not yet. By late afternoon, Sentinel Tower no longer felt like a battlefield, it felt like aftermath. The sun had shifted west, draping the skyline in warm amber light that softened the cold edges of glass and metal. Where fear had lived only hours earlier, gratitude now lingered like music that refused to fade. Graham Whitaker stood before an impromptu gathering in the atrium, the marble floor polished enough to mirror every face watching him. Agents, executives, janitors, interns, the hierarchy that once ruled this building had vanished under the weight of what had almost happened. Behind him, the Whitaker Systems logo glowed faintly on the wall, its blue light pulsing like a heartbeat returned. Graham adjusted the microphone, his expression no longer that of an untouchable CEO, but of a man who had seen mortality up close and decided to earn his second chance. "What happened today," he began, "was more than a security breach. It was a failure to listen." He looked directly at Noah, who sat beside Rosa and Claire in the front row. A $7 app on a child's phone caught what a multi-million-dollar system could not. Because courage doesn't need credentials. It just needs to speak up. Applause rippled through the hall, not loud but genuine, rising like the slow tide of something healing. "And because of that," he continued, "I intend to make sure voices like his are never ignored again." He turned, gesturing toward a large digital board behind him. The screen lit up with the title, Whitaker Young Observer Scholarship. Noah's name appeared beneath it, bold and bright, as if the city itself were announcing him. "This program," Graham said, "will fund education for young minds who show vigilance, curiosity, and compassion, the traits that saved lives today. Our first recipient," he smiled, "is the reason this building still stands." The applause that followed filled the entire atrium, echoing up to the 40th floor like thunder softened by hope. Noah blinked, stunned, his fingers curling over the edge of his chair. "A scholarship?" he whispered. Rosa covered her mouth, tears spilling silently as Graham continued. "Full tuition through college, mentorship in our cyber defense division, and a personal commitment from me to guide you every step of the way." Noah rose slowly, uncertain if he should move, until Graham gestured him forward. They met halfway across the stage, the executive and the janitor's son, standing shoulder to shoulder before the applause that united them. Graham shook his hand, the gesture simple yet monumental. "You reminded me," he said quietly, "that leadership isn't about power, it's about paying attention." Cameras flashed again, but this time, the story wasn't about espionage or fear. It was about an unlikely hero who'd taught an empire humility. When the ceremony ended, smaller victories followed like gentle aftershocks. Claire Benson received her new title, Chief of Staff, the promotion sealed by Graham himself. Her integrity had been the backbone of the day's survival, and now the company's future rested partly in her steady hands. Rosa was offered a permanent contract with benefits, training programs, and a career plan, no longer invisible, no longer replaceable. When Graham personally handed her the new ID badge, she held it as if it were a medal. "It's not charity," he told her softly. "It's overdue." She smiled, her voice trembling. "Obrigada, senor. But I already got my reward." He glanced toward Noah and nodded. So did we all. Across the lobby, Dana Klein leaned against a marble column, watching the celebration unfold with the faintest hint of a smile. Her earpiece was quiet for the first time all day. Even silence sounded like victory. When Noah spotted her, he hesitated, unsure whether to wave or salute. She crossed the room with her trademark calm, crouching slightly so her gaze met his. "You've got a sharp eye and a sharper mind," she said. "How'd you like to visit Quantico sometime? See how the cyber division really works?" Noah's eyes widened. "For real?" Dana smiled, slipping him a small card embossed with the FBI seal. "For real. You've already passed the first test." He turned the card over, the edges catching the light like a key. It read simply, "Observation is the first act of courage." And as the crowd dispersed, the boy who had once hidden behind his mother's cleaning cart looked up at the skyline and whispered, "Then I guess I'm just getting started." But Dana's gaze drifted past him, to the elevator panel where a faint signal blinked red, once, then vanished. The peace was real, but fragile. Every victory, she knew, was only the pause between two battles. Months passed, and the chaos that had once shaken Sentinel Tower faded into history, but not into silence. Spring had returned to New York, wrapping the skyline in pale gold light and making even the steel look forgiving. Inside a modest classroom at Roosevelt Middle School, Noah Alvarez stood before a projector, nervously adjusting his tie. The title slide read, "Observation and Courage. How paying attention can save lives." His classmates watched, half curious, half skeptical, the way kids do when stories sound too big to be true. Noah clicked to the first image, a diagram of the sensor Dana had let him study at Quantico. He spoke not like a hero, but like someone who had learned that responsibility begins where fear used to live. "Anyone can notice something wrong," he said. "But noticing doesn't matter unless you speak." His voice trembled at first, then steadied as he recounted the day he'd told a billionaire not to sit down, and how no one had believed him. The room was silent by the end, not out of pity, but out of awe. When he finished, his teacher wiped her eyes discreetly. She asked the question that every story eventually earns. "So, what did you learn, Noah?" He smiled, small and certain. "That courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being the first to say something when everyone else stays quiet." A week later, A charter bus rolled up to Whitaker Systems headquarters, carrying Noah's class for a special field trip. Claire Benson greeted them in the marble lobby, now featuring a permanent display called The Day Silence Lost. At its center stood the infamous black leather chair, its wiring removed, its pedestal cut open to reveal the hidden device inside. A plaque beneath it read, "Complacency is the enemy of safety." Graham Whitaker had insisted on making it a teaching monument rather than erasing it, saying, "If we hide what almost destroyed us, we'll never learn what saved us." The exhibit had become part of the company's ethics and vigilance initiative, where interns and students toured each month to study how awareness could protect both data and lives. Noah stood in front of it, watching his classmates snap selfies beside the bomb chair, laughing nervously as if humor could disguise discomfort. For him, it wasn't a relic, it was a reminder. He traced his fingers lightly across the plaque and whispered, "You almost won." Behind him, Graham's familiar voice said, "And because of you, it didn't." The CEO approached, older in spirit but lighter in step, holding a mug of black coffee instead of the briefcase that used to define him. "You know," he said, glancing at the students around them, "they used to come here to sell dreams. Now they come to learn vigilance." Noah looked up, grinning. "Guess we both changed jobs." Graham chuckled softly. "Guess we did." Later that afternoon, a small production crew filmed an internal documentary segment for the company's annual ethics summit. The final shot was simple: Graham Whitaker sitting, not in the old chair, but beside it, facing the camera. His voice was quiet, steady, unadorned by corporate polish. "On that day," he said, eyes unfocused as if replaying every moment, "I almost didn't listen to a boy who saw what none of us could." He paused, the faint hum of city traffic leaking through the glass behind him. "Today," he continued, "I listened first." The editor cut the feed there, leaving silence to finish the sentence that gratitude had already written. As the screen faded to black, white text appeared over the reflection of the skyline. "Courage has no age." The music rose softly, a single piano note stretching into light, then dissolved. In the next frame, the series title appeared for the first time: The Observers, based on true courage. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share this video so more people can discover that even the smallest act of courage can change the world. Write in the comments, "I believe in the power of courage." Together, let's keep spreading stories that transform lives and prove that hope can rise from the most unexpected voices. Thank you so much for your support.